My name's Yasmin Khan and I'm a historian based at the Department for Continuing Education in Oxford, and I've been fortunate to be funded twice in my career by the British Academy. Firstly, as a postdoctoral scholar, I had a postdoctoral fellowship at Royal Holloway, University of London, and that was many years ago. Much more recently, I was funded for a mid-career fellowship for the Pioneer Generation, Historical Narratives of British South Asian Lives. And the idea of this project is to consider how that first wave of British Asian migration in the 1950s and 1960s intersects with history, but also autobiography and biography, and how historians might tell stories of that historical migration. But anybody who works on that subject quickly comes to realise that migration did not begin to Britain in 1945 in the post-war world. There had long been a foundational layer, a group of Asians who had settled and travelled and worked in Britain right back hundreds of years, and going right back to the 18th, 19th and early 20th centuries. And a seminal text in drawing that to attention, and really the first to give that historical credence, was a book by the author and educationalist and historian Rozina Visram. And that was published in 1986. It's called Ayahs, Lascars and Princes. And Rozina's book at that point was a radical act in and of itself. In 1986, racial tensions were high. It was Thatcher's Britain. There were big fights going on for equality. There had been riots in some areas of London and Birmingham. And so this book sort of staked a claim, being published by Radical Press with Pluto in 1986, and showing that there had been this long history of an Asian presence in Britain. And it has incredibly well researched archival details about people like Ayahs, the nannies who came to look after British children in the 19th century, Lascars who worked on the ships as merchant seamen, but also princes and high status elites who came between India and Britain over many years. My second book is something completely different. It's a novel by the novelist Mulk Anand, Untouchable, and I have an old paperback copy of it here. This copy is from 1940. The book was published in 1933, and Anand was a Punjabi. He knew Punjabi, but he chose to write in English, and he typifies for me somebody who lived in this milieu between Britain and India. And although he was a passionate nationalist and very strongly campaigned for independence from Britain, he also raises questions about identity and where people's identity sits. Is it with race? Is it with nationalism? Is it with other forms of identification? And I think he typified that. There's a bit in the back of the novel, right at the end of the book, where it says it was written on a ship between India and London in 1933. And I think that also reflects how he was indeed travelling between the two places and living between two worlds at that time. My third book is something much more scholarly and more recent, which is Bill Schwarz's book, The White Man's World, Memories of Empire, which is the first in a trilogy which Bill Schwarz is writing. He's a professor at Queen Mary, University of London. And what that does, and I think it relates to these other books, is tries to understand how it was that in that post-war world we came to forget this earlier history of interaction, how empire was somehow erased from memory, and what that process of erasure looked like and how it was erased. And as a literary scholar, he uses a sort of narrative understanding of narrative to show how there was a retraction of memory, how it came to be possible through an interaction with the rise in migration from Black and Asian worlds at that time, to reinscribe Britishness as whiteness, and to see this migration as something new, which had a distinct break from the imperial past. And so I really kind of commend that book to you if you're interested in this subject.